I doubled my reading goal for week 6 in the Read What You Own challenge. How the hell did that happen? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and for the 4th year, I am co-hosting the Read What You Own challenge, originally created by the evil mastermind Criminali to read 100 books he already owned before buying another book. And like a fool, I have joined him every year. This year, there are some new rules. Instead of doing a 100 book challenge, I am doing the 25,000 page count challenge, considering that a book usually averages about 250 pages per book. I will leave a link in this video description saying exactly what the rules are. I have other co-hosts, Fiber Artsy, Crystal, and Reading This Life, MJ. I hope you join us on this reading challenge. Now, something unusual happened to me this week. I have over 2,000 pages read, which sounds really impressive, but it's not as impressive as it seems. Last week, I only finished 700 or so pages because I was in the middle of some long books that I did not finish. And 2 of the books that I finished this week were over 600 pages. And honestly, a lot of those pages were read the week before. The first book that I finished was an audiobook read for the I'm With the Band book club. This was created by MJ, and this is to get everyone to read banned books. There will be a link to that club in the description of this video. And the book that I finished was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. It is 641 pages long in the print edition. It is a romantasy. That is when you combine romance and fantasy. It is the second book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. Now, this book, honestly, is intended for a much younger and mostly female audience. I felt just a little out of place reading this as a 60-year-old man, and I kind of liked it. There are parts that really made me want to hurl the book across the room if I had been reading the book and not listening to the audiobook. Sarah J. Maas has a very contemporary writing style that just does not jive well with this pre-industrial fantasy world filled with fairies and magic. And the magic kind of annoys me. There are chapters when the characters, who are mostly fairies and have magical powers, and they're going, "What are your powers?" says one character, and the other character replies, "Oh, I have these powers." And it just really doesn't jive well with me as a reader, talking about so many magical powers. I know that's probably not going to be a big problem with most readers, but it is with me. And then there is the romance section of this book. And I just don't get along with this whole romance genre. Oh, the woman loves this man, but she can't love this man because of this reason. There's these problems, yada, 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 until it all works out in the end. And then there's this magical thing about men and women. They have mates. And this is not like a man and a woman falling in love. This is a special super duper pooper kind of love. Really not my thing. I imagine that the I'm with the Band book club probably will be reading the third book in this series. And I will go along because I do support reading banned books, even though a lot of this, A Court of Mist and Fury, is rather silly. The Redbreast by Jo Nesbo, 626 pages. This is a crime novel translated from the Norwegian. It is the third in the Harry Hole series. I have read the first in the series, but not the second. I don't think that really matters. You can probably even just skip the first in the series, even though they do refer back to some incidents in that book, but it's very trivial. And in this one, Harry Hole is back in Norway. And he helps the President of the United States. Well, I don't say he helps. There is an incident when the President of the United States is visiting, and Harry Hole has to take out a man. And there's some complications with that. I won't go into the complications because it's a bit of an interesting story. But Harry Hole gets a promotion out of this event. And then he starts investigating some strange incidences and murders. And then there is a second storyline. It goes all the way back to Leningrad in 1944, where there is a sniper shooting Russians. It is a Norwegian man who joined the Nazi Party. Kind of an odd history there. And of course, these two storylines are going to merge. There is kind of an interesting storyline in the modern day Norwegian side, which is set in the year 2000, where someone has imported a very powerful hunting rifle. Not many of these rifles were made because it's just too damn powerful. I can't remember the exact name of the rifle off the top of my head, but it is a hunting rifle that actually existed. And this has been called the best Norwegian crime novel ever written. I don't know if I would go so far as to say that, but it was a damn good crime story. I will almost certainly pick up more Harry Hole crime stories in the future. What happens when two straight people read a novel intended for gay men? I had a buddy read with Bad is Rad, and we read Frisk by Dennis Cooper. It is 444 pages in the print edition, and it is a very brutal, disturbing novel about gay men. A lot of gay men, supposedly, are rather uneasy about this book. Not only is the sex scenes rather graphic, which I presume for a gay man would not be too bad. As a straight man, it's sort of like water off my back and just don't pay that much attention. But one of the young characters is 13, and he's going through a magazine shop. And this would have been probably the 70s, maybe the 60s. And he comes across some hardcore magazines, really hardcore magazines. They are snuff magazines where you're supposed to be looking at a dead and mutilated body. Now, the 13-year-old boy later learns in life, a few years later, that these weren't real snuff magazines. They were all fake. But he is fascinated by the brutality of these photographs. And he gets some rather peculiar ideas later in life. And there is one chapter in this book where it describes one gay man murdering really brutally, really horrifically, in full graphic detail, other gay men. And I suppose that calls this like extreme horror, even though horror is not the goal of this book. And when I was reading this, not just the graphic scenes, but the gay scenes, I sort of felt like I was an unwanted voyeur, as if I were walking into a room and you notice two people having sex. The polite thing to do is quietly close the door and leave. That was my opinion of the sex scenes, being a straight man reading about gay sex. Really not my thing. And I won't go into the reasons for the murders in this book, but that also has to do very much with being a gay man and a gay man's identity and his place in the world, maybe how other people think about him. Maybe that's not exactly correct, because this book really was not intended for straight people, in my opinion. But Bad is Rad and I are both satisfied that we read this book. We both acknowledge that, yeah, it's not our thing, but reaching out and reading beyond your comfort zone can have its own rewards. If you are a reader considering this, let me state again that this novel has some rather graphic gay sex and some brutal murders. You have been warned. On audio, I listened to The Fabulous Riverboat by Philip Jose Farmer, 231 pages in the print edition. This is book number 2 in the Riverworld series. If you have not read To His Scattered Bodies Go, which is the first in the series, you really need to start with that book. This book, The Fabulous Riverboat, assumes that you have read that book, and it just plunks you down into the middle of this river world story. And if you have not read To His Scattered Bodies Go, I think most readers would be completely lost. Now, in the first book, you have a main character, Richard Burton. He was the famous Victorian explorer and translator of the original 1001 Arabian Nights. Now, in this story, you pick up with Mark Twain, better known as Samuel Clemens. He was the author, of course, of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And in this story, everyone who has ever lived finds themselves reborn on this river world. This river world is millions of miles long, and no one knows why they have been reborn on this world. And they are also essentially immortal. If you die on this river world, you are reborn again. Now, Sam Clemens, if you do not know, was a riverboat captain before he became the popular novelist. And he was to create a riverboat to explore this million-mile river. And I thought this book was going to go in a much different direction than it did. This book is about resources and politics, with a little bit of religion thrown in, because this world does not have a lot of natural resources. And maybe you don't think building a riverboat takes a lot of resources, but it takes a lot of resources to build a riverboat. And you get some fun side characters. Many of the minor characters in this book are actual historical figures. I won't mention them all, but I will mention that Hermann Göring shows up, that rather brutal Nazi who's had a rather change of philosophies in his life. He is now a religious preacher, creating his own new religion for the river world. Really bizarre, but I kind of like it. There is one other character in this book who is fictional, but I kept thinking, could he have been Malcolm X? And Philip Jose Farmer did not actually want to use the real Malcolm X name in this novel. I don't know. I read this with Gavin at Genre Reads, and we were both sort of ambivalent, maybe, maybe not, but we love the appearance of all these characters. There is, of course, King John, who is more famously known in the real world as a bad king, but the author of the Magna Carta. So if you like classic science fiction, I can highly recommend this book, but you do need to pick up the first of the series, To His Scattered Bodies Go, first. I will be reading the rest of the series. I will pick them up on Audible. The next one is The Dark Design, tentatively scheduled for January. My good friend, Alan, at Big Hard Books and Classics, who lives out in Portland, kept texting me and sending messages about a play he got to see in Portland, Waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot is one of my favorite plays. I've never actually seen it performed live, but I like Samuel Beckett as an author. So I picked up The Unnamable by Samuel Beckett. This is the third in his famous trilogy. Now, this is a very strange story. Most stories by Samuel Beckett are very strange. This is sort of existential philosophy, sort of loosely disguised in a fictional form. And in this story, there is a man. The man is essentially just a head in a jar, making observations about life, the meaning of existence, saying, why do we continue to live? Why do we go on? Do we have to go on? Now, can I understand everything by Samuel Beckett that he writes? No. But by not understanding Samuel Beckett, maybe I'm understanding Samuel Beckett. There are some references in The Unnamable to some of the earlier books. That would be Murphy and Malone Dies, because there's some confusion about who those characters were. Maybe The Unnamable is one of those characters, or maybe he's both, or maybe he's none of them. It's that weird. If you have not tried a Samuel Beckett novel, do pick up Murphy first. But be prepared just for unusualness. Now, you will notice that is a very long paragraph on that page. And that page is a very long paragraph because the whole novel is essentially one long paragraph, except for the first few pages. Like the first 10 pages has sort of normal paragraph breaks, and then it just goes into that huge long paragraph. I'm not sure I fully understand it. I kind of like it. I don't understand it. And maybe, again, by not understanding it, I'm getting closer to understanding it. If you like that kind of fiction, this is great stuff. I am continuing right along with my 2-month project to read Against the Day by Thomas Pynchon. This week, I read 119 pages. I'm sort of on a schedule to read 20 to 22 pages per day, depending on when the chapter breaks happen. And this story is building steam. Lots of little vignettes that you get. Lots of characters show up, disappear, for a number of pages and then reappear. And I'm not sure exactly where the story is going, but Pynchon is just such a magnificent writer. His details are entice me to read more. Now, if you don't like lots of details, talking about outdated science, if you don't like to be told about dynamite, maybe this book is not going to be for you. But so far, I'm really liking it, and I plan to finish it in January. My readings for Cthulhu Christmas are moving right along. I had intended originally just to read one short story per week, but reading these horror stories are just they're like candy. You just can't eat one of them. So I have read 4 Lovecraft stories this week, and they were The Dreams in the Witch House, 27 pages, The Music of Erick Zann, 10 pages, The Hound, 8 pages, and The Festival by 9. It's 9 pages. Now, The Hound and The Festival are not Lovecraft's best stories. They're highly entertaining and they work well enough. Let's just say The Hound is about some grave robbers who steal something out of a grave, and let's just say that thing in the grave is not too happy. Then there is The Festival, where there is a secret ritual held by secret, unnameable things that can be observed if you know when it's happening. Now, the other 2 stories that I read are really top-notch Lovecraft, in my opinion, and that would be Dreams in the Witch House, where a student of, let's just say, mysticism is moving to an old house where a witch supposedly died because he wants to study this witch. He wants to get to know more about this witch. It is a rather run-down house with some rather seedy tenants. And then he starts having dreams about other places. And in this story, Lovecraft tries to mix magic with science, because he was that kind of man. He was a very scientifically minded man when he was not being an out-and-out racist. But in this story, there's an idea that if you know the correct mathematical formula, you can step between worlds and visit other places in the universe. It is a really interesting take on a horror story with some mixes of science in there. And you've got to love Brown Jenkins. That's one of the characters in this story. And I won't say more about Brown Jenkins, but you'll love Brown Jenkins. The second great short story from Lovecraft I'd read is The Music of Erick Zann. This is one of my favorites. It is again the story of a student. He is in Paris. He is very poor. He takes up residence in a house with some very strange tenants. One of them is a mute Jewish man playing a viol. And he plays the music wildly at night. Very strange tunes that do not seem earthly. And why is Erick Zann playing this music? Classic Lovecraft. Is this a cosmic horror story? Or is this a story of complete and utter madness? Really good. I love the music of Erick Zann as a short story. I am continuing right on with my reading of Jorge Luis Borges' short stories. The first was Pierre Menard, author of Quixote, and the second was The Circular Ruins. In the first short story, a man decides he needs to rewrite Quixote by Cervantes, but he wants to rewrite it word for word. Kind of weird. The second one is sort of a take on an old Chinese saying. Am I a man dreaming that I'm a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming that I am a man? Good short stories, but I'm getting up to some of the best that he ever wrote next week and the weeks after. Okay, that is my wrap up. How did I do? I finished 2,013 pages for a total in my challenge so far of 7,772 pages. And if I'm not completely mistaken with my math, that means I am about 31% done with my challenge. Well, that's all that I've done for this week. On to week 7. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.